Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Crutchfield Dermatology, a full-service treatment center and Medi-Spa in Eagan. Their goal is to help you look good and feel great with beautiful skin. With service built around courtesy, dignity, and respect, Mayo-trained Dr. Charles Crutchfield personally treats each patient and is acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org. Edina Eye Physicians and Surgeons, a division of Twin Cities Eye Consultants, has proudly served the Twin Cities for more than 55 years now in 7 convenient locations. Using the most advanced technology combined with human touch, Edina Eye offers comprehensive services and dedicated specialists committed to excellence with innovative procedures and expertise for the most advanced eye care.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. We have a first-time guest, a very multifaceted individual. Ian Graham Leask, we'll refer to you as Ian, who is a publisher with Calumet Editions, among other companies. And we'll talk about Ian, his background, publishing, etc. As a way of a disclaimer, Calumet Editions is also the publisher of my novel, which is sitting here, and we'll talk about that perhaps.
Well, we're very happy to publish it, very happy to publish it, and thanks so much for having me on your show.
It's our pleasure. Now, you were born in London.
Yes.
You had a very unhappy childhood.
Yeah, we're going to start with that.
which led to your first book.
Yeah, kind of did. Yeah. I think it led to a lot of things. It led to probably coming to America. Probably led to becoming a writer. I think that, as Hemingway said, the only way to be a really good writer is to have an unhappy childhood. And at least in that aspect,
helps, yeah.
I think that was true. Yeah, it was pretty rotten. And but you survive, and I still love my parents, even though they could have been better parents.
Looking back, though, we probably all could have been better parents in some regards.
Sure, yeah, that's right.
And however, I don't think that's what your daughters say of you, because they seem to be pretty happy with you.
They're pretty happy. My kids, I'm lucky with my kids. They've all got strong personalities, and they couldn't be bullied in any way. So, yeah, I think they're pretty happy kids. And I learned a lot about parenting from the opposite end of it, to know what not to do, from growing up in a very middle class household in London. And
I did too,
yeah.
And of course I had a mother. I couldn't do anything wrong, and that's a very wrong way to bring.
That's right. Yeah,
up.
I couldn't do anything right.
It's
yeah. So
that's the other extreme. It's just as bad.
Yeah,
perhaps worse.
I don't. It's hard to compare people's lives, and I see people there's a massive continuum of how people grow up, and my place, obviously in one's life you're in the middle of that, but there's people infinitely worse. Yeah. But then there's people that I hear complaining, and they shouldn't really be complaining,
A good shrink can help.
Well,
yeah. Now, somehow or other you ended up as a meat porter in Germany.
I did.
What is a meat porter, and how did you end up in Germany?
Well, it's an interesting story. I met an American girl, and I was a bouncer in England, playing rugby, trying to do a little bit of college, and was reading. I was mad about D.H. Lawrence, and I was reading Sons and Lovers in a basement discotheque, and in comes this beautiful blonde girl from Minnesota. She's from Edina, and she just got back from the Soviet Union on a University of Minnesota trip, and under her arm she had a book of the short stories of Pushkin. And I had a big black eye from a rugby injury, and she immediately assumed it was from fighting and being a bouncer, which certainly could happen, but it was a rugby injury. It was out here, and she thought I was, as they say, a badass, you know, which I sort of was, but not as bad as she thought. And she saw my book, and it was early in the evening, and she was a bit jet lagged, and she came out early, and we started to compare these books, and I'd nearly finished with D.H. Lawrence's Sons and Lovers, and she had finished Pushkin, and we swapped books. And that night I went home and started reading Pushkin.
The rest, as they say,
and
is
the rest
history.
That's why I became an English major, you know, riding that wild horse across the steppes with a beautiful girl hanging onto your back and your hair flying, and not that I have any anymore, but you know, it was amazing. And she and I were, first of all, very good friends. She wanted to stay in Europe, and I married her to keep her in England. And I'd already been married and had a child from an earlier marriage. So it was all a bit awkward, but I was sick of being in England. I was sick of the politics. It was very, very dingy and dire at the time. And I decided to have friends in Germany, and we went to live in Germany. I wanted to be a poet. Trouble is, there's not much money in being a poet, so...
No, unfortunately.
No.
There are a lot of starving poets, but there are also a lot of starving writers. So
there's a lot of starving writers, but so they got me a job, my friends got me a job in what's called a Schlachthof, which is basically an abattoir, or a place where they a slaughterhouse where they slaughter the beef and the pigs and the rest of it. And so for a while there, I was humping the beef around, and it was good money, and I was able to live in West Germany for a while. And I rode at night, and I did try to write poems, but I kept
She wanted
moving.
to come back home to
it's
Minnesota.
It's a good story. She
And you said Minnesota. Why would I want to go to Minnesota?
well, I had visited here. I had come here in a year before to visit her, and I loved it. Absolutely fell in love with it.
You must have been here in the summer.
It was summer.
Yeah.
But the lakes, and then we went up north, and I fell in love with Lake Superior, and we drove a little Carmen gear all the way up into Canada, and went up to Kenora and all around in Canada, and I just fell in love with the whole area, and this beautiful inland sea, which is Lake Superior.
Well, there's two things about Minnesota. Number one, the quality of life here is just incredibly good.
Absolutely, yeah.
And number two, the beauty of this state is really unsurpassed.
It's extraordinary. I mean, there's no mountains and there's no sea, but there are forests, and there's these wonderful lakes, and I fell in love with paddling and the boundary waters and all that, and I just absolutely, I still love it. And you were asking me earlier, I think, in the blue room, green room, where was home? Is London still home? And yes, it is. But I was just there for a month, and just left the day before the Queen died, and got back here. And I was very happy to get back here, and happy to fly over and see the broccoli forest that is the Twin Cities when you fly over it, and to land here and to be able to drive my car without being stuck in traffic jams. And it was lovely to be back.
And if you like corn, there's no better place to be.
Yeah, that's true.
Now, you ended up at the University of Minnesota.
Well, as soon as I got here, I thought I'd continue my education, and I was eking away at it in various ways as a young man, and never really finishing anything. And I went to night school at the university and met a fellow called Charlie Norman, who's recently passed on, and he was teaching creative writing classes at night school. And he encouraged me, thought I had talent, and he loved what I was doing, and I really liked him as a teacher, and I'd almost say he taught me how to teach. He was the first
That's
teacher.
interesting, because I was at Syracuse, and with Donald Dyke.
Oh.
And I had just the opposite. He told me, as a writer, you better become a lawyer. And I did. And right behind me was Joyce Carol Oates, and she seems to have made it with Donald Dyke.
No.
But
her book Blonde is now a film. I don't think I like that very much. I don't like it.
I don't care for Joyce, Joyce's type of writing, but she certainly has tasted success.
Yes, well, she's very talented and very prolific, and she's a very good teacher.
So today you are pretty much a teacher, a literary consultant, a writer, and a publisher.
Yeah, well, mostly a publisher.
How did that come about?
Well, through those things that you've just mentioned. Once I graduated, I was in the PhD program at the University of Minnesota, pulled into that, and had an MA in English and writing. And I decided along the way, for various reasons, which is a whole other show, that I didn't really want to be a professor. And the only reason you get a PhD is really to be a professor. And I liked publishing. I started out by publishing a magazine, a university magazine called Fallout, with a friend of mine called Don Leeper, who's gone on to be fairly successful in the publishing world himself. And I loved it, and was able to publish some quite good authors. I got some Sharon Olds, for example, and Judy Healy. I was able to publish their first work, and often got work from established authors of various kinds. Like I published one of the plays, a fantastic play by Marisha Chamberlain. And I loved the sense of doing that and editing that work and seeing it come out in print. I've always been a little bit more interested in publishing other people than myself. I don't know why. I suppose it's the Robin Hood in me, the sense of wanting to do that for other people.
Well, as I have found out through holding court, a publisher really can be a great help to an author.
Yeah.
The line edit and the ultimate edit on my book just made it better.
Yeah.
And but along the way, you've written a couple of books also.
Yes, and there's a couple in the hopper too. I mean, it's just not the priority right now. The priority is to make this idea, Calumet Editions, to make it work and legitimize it. My partner Gary Lindberg and I got together some year in 2014, and we started the company in August 2014. Both of us are authors. He'd written a lot more than I had, but more in the popular vein. Mine's more in the sort of literary vein, if you can make that distinction anymore. I'm not sure you can legitimately do that anymore, but that's how I still think about it. And
so that was Calumet Editions?
That was Calumet, and he already had created a kind of self-publishing entity called Calumet Editions, and I just sold my stake in a traditional publishing company that was at the time called Scarletta Press, and I couldn't make any money at that in the traditional publishing world, and I was frustrated with it. But the good thing was that I kind of got my PhD in publishing by doing that. So I understand the publishing industry backwards and forwards, and to be honest, I'm very disappointed in it. And it's not fair to authors, not really fair to publishers, unless you're a very, very big publisher and you have some authors that can create a lot of sell-in to the bookstores.
If you're John Grisham. Publishing can be very fair to you.
Yes. Yes. So we created a new model, which is between self-publishing and traditional publishing, where we do joint venture publishing. So we acquire the rights to the book and try so that you can sell foreign rights, film rights, all those kinds of things to the book. But we try not to do any printing. We try to do it all through print on demand. A lot of people don't like that because they think, oh, I want to have my book in a bookstore. I'm a writer, I should be in a bookstore. Trouble is, if your book goes through a bookstore, there's no profit in it at all for the author.
They have 10,000 books, many of which go back to the publisher
Yeah.
because they're unsold.
The returns policy in bookstores, and don't get me wrong, I love bookstores. I mean, I've spent half my life in them, but the truth is that they're not very useful for authors and not particularly useful for publishers. It's bad juju, and we decided not to do that anymore. There's plenty of people doing the traditional system. We're going to do something different and make it work. And as the bookstores become less and less popular, people go into them less and less. And I haven't been in a full bookstore in years. It's years since I've been in a bookstore. It was hopping and packed with people like it used to be when I was younger.
Well, it used to be a gathering place for people who were interested in literature.
Yeah.
And
now you
there's
go
some
to
question about what literature is today. What's really popular is unfortunately not literature.
Well, I'm not going to say anything against what is being published. I'd rather talk about what is not getting published.
Okay.
And we've just published a lovely book by a woman called Courtney Lochner from Wisconsin. And she had a long experience. She wrote a fantastic book called The French House and got an agent, and the agent found nothing wrong with the book and helped to edit it and improve it, and apparently sold it. But the sale fell through. She tried to sell it again, that sold through. Then she got this young author at the time to write a second book and said, well, the second book will help me sell the first book. Well, nothing happened, and the young author became no longer a young author, but a very vivacious mother of two children, and just she's a tough person that keeps trying. And I met her at a very interesting writers' conference in Wisconsin a few years ago, and she told me about this, and I said, well, I love the look of that book, give me it, let me read it. I loved it, and it was not getting published anywhere. So finally we got it, and we published it.
Calumet published it.
Calumet published it, and it's called The French House by Courtney Lochner. It is a brilliant book. Now, why didn't that book get published? Why didn't the traditional publishing system publish it? Well, because there's no room. There's no room, there's no money. And there's so many great books. When I was making my living, and a very good living, as a literary consultant, I can't tell you how many great authors I helped to write fantastic books. And they'd send their books out, and they might send it to a literary agent. The literary agent would write back and say, I loved your book, but there's too many like it in the marketplace, so I'm going to pass on it. Or they might say, this is so unique.
I've been there and done that.
Yeah, it's so unique, I can't find a place for it. And then, so what do you do? So, well, you finally find somebody to take the book. And then she sends it out. And she sends it to one publisher, and the publisher says, well, there's too many books like this in the marketplace. And then she sends it to another publisher, and the publisher says, no, this is too unique for me to publish. I don't know how to pigeonhole it. They get the same answers, and it's all nonsense. Yeah. And
the fact of the matter is, none of these people can guess right.
No, nobody can. Nobody,
it can be a fluke.
Nobody knows what a bestseller is, and nobody can predict that unless it's an author that's got.
Look at Colleen Hoover, who is now selling like crazy. If you like her type of book.
Well, there's loads of things like that. I mean, if you like Grisham's books, he's a big seller. What happens with the publishing houses, they get together with their distributors, and they will create a system called sell-in, where they sell in their print run into, let's say, Barnes and Noble, and it sells all the way. It sells in to the bookstores. It doesn't mean it's sold. It merely means that the books have been put on shelves. Sell through is when you go and buy the book, take it home, and don't return it.
Right.
So the New York Times bestseller list, I'm here to tell you, is based on sell in, not sell through. Nobody will tell you that.
That's very interesting.
Nobody will tell you that. So it's false. And there's this, so many little games get played with all of this, and then you have people come up and say, well, don't get into a joint venture because that means that money has to pass through hands.
Told that.
Yeah, you know, how do you have a joint venture without?
By several successful authors.
Yeah.
And you want to know something? If it wasn't for ignoring that, this book, which was really on my bucket list, would not have been published.
Not be there. Yeah, that's right. Now, I've got your friend Josh Webber is going to be in Frankfurt next week, and he's going to try and sell the foreign rights to that book. That can't happen if you're self-published, and it seldom happens if you're traditionally published. So you need a middle way. So we're trying to create that middle way. Oh my God, I get a lot of negative feedback about it, but you know, it's just gone. We just try to keep it honest, straightforward, and have integrity with it.
As time is fleeting here,
of course, yeah.
You have a second company, however.
Afton Press, yes, that's.
And what is that?
Afton Press is a non-profit organisation, traditional publishing company, very, very small now. But I kind of pulled it out of the fire. It's a publisher whose name is Patricia MacDonald. She died, unfortunately, and her daughters kind of tried to keep the publishing house alive for a while, and not very successfully, and managed to pass it to me. And we created a home for it in our offices in Edina. It was really a St. Paul company, but we, you know, at a stroke, cut our rent in half by having two companies in one set of offices, and it's worked very well. But we keep it small. But what we're trying to do with that is to present art and culture that is specific to Minnesota.
You do the Minnesota Historical Society, do you not?
Yes, they've helped us. They're a wonderful organisation. Oh my God, without them, there wouldn't. Oh my God, the arts in this city would, in Minnesota in general, wouldn't be anywhere near as powerful without them. I love them, and they've been of great service to us.
So somebody comes to you with a book.
Mm-hmm.
A geriatric.
A lovely old geriatric.
Very few people will agree with that. But and he says, I've written a novel. I always wanted to write a novel. I've written a couple of books, nonfiction. I've always wanted to write a novel. And he presents it to you. What's the process that you have at that point? Because I'm sure you have a lot of authors.
Yeah, we do.
Bringing a lot of books to you.
Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches. Luckily, we get quite a lot of good referrals. At the moment, everything's really working on referrals. So the first thing we have to do is look at the author and the book itself, and to see what kind of capacity the author has for making the book successful. That's not just being a writer, but that's also being having a certain kind of personality. So the old model sometimes for authors, at least in their mind, seems to be you go to a publisher and the publisher gives you a great big advance, and you go and hang out on the beach in Florida with a mint julep. That doesn't happen. I don't think it ever did, but that's kind of the model that a lot of people hope for. What we need to do with yourself, for example, was examine who you were and what kind of capacity you would have for working with us. And we look at the book and see if it's got legs. And then we help you edit the book and look at the book, read the book and say, okay, well, here's where you're going in the wrong direction in this. So we try to help you improve the book as much as we can, and we're not going to take the book unless that can happen. So part of the beauty of the acquisitional model is that instead of rejecting a book and saying, okay, well, there's something wrong with it, it's not quite right, go away and try somewhere else and never come back with this book, which is what happens with traditional publishing. We say, no, we love this book, but it's not quite right yet. We have to edit it and talk to the author and involve the author in that editorial process, which we did with you. And
Right.
you know, I think you enjoyed the whole process of editing, and we came up with things that you probably didn't expect.
You know what my problem is? As I said to you, I am an A personality, ex-New York lawyer, and I want instant gratification. So I want 100,000 copies of this to sell, and we haven't quite,
No.
in a month, we haven't quite attained
No,
that.
they're not in a month. It's a very new book, and you won't, not 100,000. But I mean, it's possible. But the thing is that people are reading less and less, and we have to kind of drop our expectations a little bit about
That's
what
one
we're
of the
doing.
things we're not going to have enough time to talk
No,
about.
it's a
But the
shame.
fact of the matter is, people, I believe because of social media, are reading so much less. And I think the IQ of the average person has gone down because of that.
Well, maybe they've got a different IQ. They're learning different things. If you ask them, if you had them run an IQ test, there's going to be different questions on it. And they probably know the same things, but not the same things as you and I know.
Learning how to attack the United States Capitol violently. Yeah,
Oh my
well,
goodness.
that's the kind of thing that unfortunately too many of them are learning.
No,
So-
there's a lot of nonsense out there, and there always was.
So what advice would you have, and I see we only have a minute and a half left, what advice would you have to the young lawyer? And I just spoke to somebody, to the young writer,
To the
excuse
young
me.
writer, yeah.
I just spoke to somebody and he was getting discouraged, and I said, you know, you've got to keep plugging at it. You've got to keep going. You can't take rejection.
Well, you know, the trick is to keep writing and to take a break from it when you're not feeling good about it, and to read like crazy, to read in the area that you are most interested in. Read what you really like.
Which I certainly did with this
Yeah,
one.
Yeah, and that's the trick, is to stick with what you really like. Try to read men and women. Try to read, you know, right across the whole spectrum of humanity if you can. Definitely get out of America and read what's going on with European, African, Australian, South American authors, Mexican authors, Canadian authors, Irish especially if you like rhythm. Scots authors. You know, the thing is to be as eclectic as you can be and to really enjoy your writing. Enjoy yourself. If you're not enjoying it, set it aside until a day when you feel like you are going to enjoy
And discipline yourself as well.
it. Yeah,
so
discipline's a double-edged sword. Don't beat yourself up, but try to get it done.
We've been speaking with Ian Graham Leask, the publisher of Calumet Editions. Among other things, he's also the author of several books, and you saw them up on the screen. And Ian, thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Thank you.